What if the very system designed to find the truth was now built on an assumption of guilt? What if, in a desperate race to correct decades of failure, the fundamental principle of justice, innocent until proven guilty, was being quietly put at risk? In the United Kingdom, a new nationwide police operation was launched with the noble intention of finally supporting victims of rape and bringing more perpetrators to justice. It's called Operation Bluestone, part of a wider program named Operation Soteria. The goal was to radically reform how police investigate rape by focusing intensely on the suspect from day one. It was born from the very best of intentions, a response to years of failing victims and letting offenders walk free. But what happens when that intense focus lands on the wrong person? What happens when a system, under immense pressure to get convictions, points its powerful, unblinking eye at an innocent individual? This video investigates how Operation Bluestone's methods, while well-intentioned, may be threatening the principle of a fair and neutral investigation for all, creating a chilling new reality where an accusation can feel like a verdict. Imagine being woken in the early hours of the morning by a hammering on your door. You're arrested. Your home is searched. Your phone, your laptop, your entire digital life is confiscated. You are now the primary suspect in a rape investigation. Before you've even had a chance to fully comprehend the accusation, the system is already moving as if you're guilty. Legally, the burden is still on the state to prove your guilt beyond a reasonable doubt that hasn't changed. But in practice, it can feel like the burden has now shifted onto you to somehow prove your innocence. This isn't a hypothetical scenario from a dystopian novel. This is the potential reality for some people under the UK's new approach to investigating sexual offences. We are going to unravel how a progressive-sounding idea, the suspect-focused investigation, can in practice become a nightmare for the wrongly accused and a distortion of the very justice it claims to serve. To understand Operation Bluestone, you first have to understand the catastrophic failure that came before it. For decades, the British justice system has been fundamentally broken when it comes to the crime of rape. The statistics paint a grim and shameful picture. Reports of rape were at record highs, yet the number of cases even making it to court, let alone resulting in a conviction, had plummeted. Between 2016 and 2020, prosecutions for rape fell by a staggering 64%. The situation was so dire that by 2021, only 1.6% of reported rapes resulted in a charge. Think about that. For every 100 people who came forward, 98 saw their cases dropped before even getting that far. One police force, Avon and Somerset, which would later become the pilot for Bluestone, ranked 40th out of 43 forces in the country for its performance on these crimes. Its charge rate was a dismal 3%. This wasn't just a statistical problem, it was a systemic crisis of confidence. Victims felt abandoned, disbelieved, and re-traumatized by the very people they turned to for help. The End-to-End Rape Review, a landmark government report, laid bare the scale of the problem. It found that victims were dropping out of the justice process in droves, not because their cases lacked merit, but because the investigation itself was so grueling. They felt they, not their alleged attackers, were the ones on trial. Their credibility was questioned, their personal lives dissected, and their phones and private data subjected to what many called a digital strip search. In response to this outcry, the government pledged to overhaul the system. The ambition was clear and public, to dramatically increase the number of adult rape cases reaching court. From this pledge, Operation Soteria Bluestone was born. Launched initially as a pilot project in Avon and Somerset, In 2021, its principles were soon rolled out to all 43 police forces across England and Wales. The core idea, on paper, sounds not just reasonable, but revolutionary. The new model would be victim-centered, suspect-focused, and context-led. The term suspect-focused was the key. Police and prosecutors were explicitly told to shift their attention away from the victim's credibility and onto the suspect's actions. The aim was to build cases by scrutinizing the suspect's behavior before, during, and after the alleged offense. No longer would the investigation default to questioning the victim's character. Instead, the focus would be on the perpetrator's patterns of behavior, their history, and the evidence surrounding their actions on the day in question. This was hailed as a paradigm shift, an Al Capone approach, as one officer described it, aimed at disrupting offenders by any legal means possible. The program was built on 6 pillars for improvement, including disrupting repeat offenders, better officer training, and a more just approach to victim engagement. It was a direct response to the criticism that for too long, police investigations had effectively put victims on trial. The intention was to finally get justice for survivors and hold perpetrators accountable. But in the complex world of criminal justice, even the best ideas can have unforeseen consequences. The very principle that made Bluestone so promising, its intense early focus on the suspect, also carried a dark and dangerous risk. It created a system where the presumption of innocence could be strained from the very first moment an allegation is made. The principle of being innocent until proven guilty isn't just a legal technicality, it's the bedrock of a free and fair society. It means the state carries the entire burden of proving guilt. The accused doesn't have to prove their innocence. This principle is meant to protect every citizen from the overwhelming power of the state, acting as a crucial safeguard against wrongful convictions. Operation Bluestone, however, introduces a subtle but profound shift in this dynamic. By mandating a suspect-focused investigation from the outset, it risks creating a powerful psychological trap for investigators: confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the natural human tendency to look for, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms what you already believe. Once an individual is officially labeled the suspect in a high-stakes, politically sensitive investigation like rape, the objective search for truth can quietly morph into a mission to prove that label was correct. This isn't necessarily about malicious intent. It's often the result of a system under immense pressure, staffed by human beings who are susceptible to the same cognitive biases as anyone else. Suddenly, an ambiguous text message isn't just a text, it's proof of manipulation. A gap in an alibi isn't just a memory lapse, it's a sign of deception. Evidence that points towards guilt gets amplified, while evidence that suggests innocence or even just uncertainty can be downplayed or ignored. The College of Policing, which sets standards for UK police, explicitly states that a suspect-focused investigation is not guilty until proven innocent. They say it's about understanding and correctly interpreting available evidence. Yet this is an incredibly fine line to walk. The investigative process becomes front-loaded with suspicion. The starting point is no longer a neutral. An allegation has been made. Let's find the truth. But rather, this person is the suspect. Let's investigate them to build a case. For an innocent person caught in this net, the consequences are devastating. They are immediately on the defensive, forced to explain and justify their every action. The police may be collecting evidence, but it can be with the predetermined goal of securing a charge. This is a profound reversal of what a fair investigation should be. A truly fair investigation must be neutral. It has to follow the evidence wherever it leads, whether that's towards guilt, innocence, or ambiguity. It can't start with a conclusion and work backwards. The very structure of Operation Bluestone was designed to counteract the police's old habit of focusing on the victim's credibility. The problem is that it may not have eliminated this flawed approach, but simply inverted it. Instead of an obsessive focus on disproving the victim, it risks creating an equally obsessive focus on proving the suspect's guilt. This creates a precarious situation where the safeguards meant to protect the presumption of innocence are strained, and an investigation can become less of a search for truth and more of a process for case building against a pre-selected target. To truly grasp why a suspect-focused model can so easily curdle into a guilt-presumed one, we have to look at the cultural soil where this new policy was planted. For years, academic studies and internal reviews have warned of a pervasive and damaging culture within UK policing, a culture steeped in rape myths. They are deeply ingrained, false beliefs about sexual violence, victims, and perpetrators. They aren't just harmless misconceptions. They actively shape how police officers handle rape allegations. A 2024 survey commissioned by the Crown Prosecution Service found that while public understanding has improved, significant false beliefs persist. For example, only a third of people correctly identified that women rarely make up rape allegations. These myths generally fall into two categories. First is victim fabrication, the idea that false allegations are common and that people lie for revenge or out of regret. The second is victim precipitation, the insidious belief that a victim's own choices, what they wore, if they were drinking, contributed to their assault. And here's the shocking part. These myths aren't just held by the public. They are alarmingly prevalent within the police forces themselves. A 2019 survey of UK police officers showed high levels of acceptance of rape myths. More recently, a 2023 study for Operation Soteria Bluestone itself found striking evidence that these myths are believed by the specialist officers investigating rape cases. Researchers found it was of considerable concern that some officers didn't even know what rape myths were. One senior officer told researchers, "We massively prejudge the credibility of the victim." In one force, there was a belief among senior management that the system is clogged up with false allegations, despite research consistently showing that genuinely false allegations make up only a tiny minority of cases, around 3%. This culture shows up in the questions victims are asked. Why didn't you scream? Why did you go back to their flat? A victim's sexual history might be seen as more relevant than the assault itself. As a 2024 report by Saunders Law noted, police officers who accept these myths are more likely to try to disprove an allegation rather than prove it. This brings us to the central damning contradiction at the heart of Operation Bluestone. The Soteria Bluestone Year 1 report, the official review of the program, found that police forces had in fact been running victim credibility investigations. They were basing their investigations on trying to prove the survivor was untrustworthy, rather than focusing on the suspect. This is the polar opposite of the program's stated goal. It reveals that you can't just impose a new policy like suspect-focused investigation onto a flawed institutional culture and expect it to work. If an officer subconsciously believes many rape allegations are false, being told to be suspect-focused doesn't fix the problem. Their ingrained myths might lead them to look for evidence that proves the victim is unreliable, which in turn exonerates the suspect and confirms their pre-existing belief that the allegation was dubious from the start. The investigation becomes a search for anything that fits the unreliable victim narrative. The focus on the suspect becomes a twisted way to disprove the victim, creating a vicious cycle where the victim is disbelieved and the accused is never properly investigated for their own actions. The system ends up failing both sides. So you have a new policy, But who is actually carrying it out? The cultural problem of rape myths is made worse by a massive structural problem in British policing, a critical lack of specialist expertise. Investigating rape is one of the most complex and sensitive areas of police work, requiring a deep understanding of trauma and offender behavior. Yet, the officers tasked with these investigations are often undertrained and overworked. The Operation Soteria Bluestone Year 1 report delivered a stark verdict on this. It found that an influx of inexperienced investigators managing these cases had created significant problems. The report directly linked these issues to insufficient learning and development. Rape Crisis England and Wales described the massive gaps in specialism and experience in policing as unacceptable. Academics studying the issue highlighted that detectives on these cases often receive no specialist training at all. One officer admitted their surprise, saying, "I wasn't going to get any training. Why the detectives don't get training is something of a mystery to me. This isn't a minor oversight. It's a fundamental flaw. An inexperienced officer is more likely to fall back on the crude stereotypes peddled by rape myths. They may not understand that trauma can manifest in contradictory ways, that a victim might not cry or might have memory gaps." A 2024 CPS survey found that less than half of people recognized victims may not report immediately. Without specialist training, an officer can easily misinterpret these trauma responses as signs of deception. Now, place this inexperienced officer into the high-pressure environment of Operation Bluestone. They're under a mandate to be suspect-focused and to increase charges. They're dealing with overwhelming workloads and are emotionally burned out. Another key finding of the Soteria report. This creates a perfect storm for miscarriages of justice. The pressure to get a result, combined with a lack of nuanced understanding, can lead an investigator to take shortcuts. The easiest shortcut is to build a case around a single narrative of guilt. The suspect-focused model, in the hands of an untrained officer, can become a blunt instrument. They identify a suspect, and the investigation narrows to finding evidence that supports that conclusion, rather than exploring all reasonable lines of inquiry. The goal can shift from discovering the truth to simply getting a case to the Crown Prosecution Service. This is where the danger to the innocent becomes acute. The entire weight of the investigation is directed at one person, but the person directing it may lack the skills to navigate the complexities of the evidence. They're looking for a straightforward story of guilt, because it's the simplest path through a demanding job. The nuances of human interaction and consent can be flattened into a one-dimensional picture that fits the required outcome. You cannot build a sophisticated new investigative framework on a foundation of inexperience. By demanding a suspect focus from officers who aren't equipped with the specialist knowledge to apply it correctly, the system risks creating more injustice, not less. In the 21st century, our lives are meticulously documented on our digital devices. Our phones and laptops are intimate extensions of ourselves. For someone accused of a crime under the new model, this digital world becomes the primary place to mine for evidence of guilt. One of the key justifications for Operation Bluestone was to end the digital strip search of victims, where their own phones were combed through for anything to undermine their credibility. The new model promised to shift this focus onto the suspect, but in practice, the invasive process has in many ways simply been redirected with equal intensity toward the accused. From the moment an allegation is made, a suspect's digital life is no longer their own. Police have the power to seize phones, laptops, and hard drives, downloading years of data, every text, every email, every social media post. This digital dragnet is then scrutinized by investigators operating under the suspect-focused mandate and the cognitive weight of confirmation bias. For an innocent person, this is terrifying. Every private conversation, every bad joke, every moment of frustration in a text can be ripped out of context and reinterpreted through a lens of suspicion. An argument with the accuser months earlier can be reframed as a pattern of aggression. A poorly worded message can be twisted into an admission of guilt. Context, which is everything in human communication, is stripped away. Investigators aren't looking for a balanced picture of a person's life. They are often searching for specific data points that can be woven into the narrative they are building. This digital investigation can drag on for months, even years, leaving the accused in a state of perpetual limbo. The psychological toll is immense. It's a profound invasion of privacy that happens long before any charge has been brought, let alone a trial conducted. The irony is that this practice was born from a desire to protect victims' privacy. Yet instead of finding a balanced and proportionate way to handle digital evidence, the system seems to have just shifted the full weight of this intrusion onto the accused. The seizure of a person's entire digital life can become a default step, a fishing expedition in the hope of catching something that sticks. This digital dragnet represents the modern face of a presumed guilt culture. It treats an accused's entire personal history as a potential crime scene. This is a complex and deeply divisive issue. On one hand, you have a justice system that was catastrophically failing victims, and a new model that is showing early signs of bringing more perpetrators to account. On the other, you have the very real risk of eroding the fundamental principle of innocent until proven guilty and creating a new kind of injustice. There are no easy answers. So what do you think? Is Operation Bluestone a necessary correction to a broken system, or is it a dangerous overstep that threatens the rights of everyone? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. This is a conversation we need to be having. The story of Operation Bluestone is a story of good intentions colliding with a flawed reality. There's no debate that the old way of investigating rape in the UK was a profound failure. A system that disbelieves and re-traumatizes victims is not a system of justice. The desire to fix this was a moral imperative. However, in the rush to solve one problem, we risk creating another, combining a suspect-focused directive with a police culture still grappling with rape myths, and placing it in the hands of an often inexperienced workforce, has created a dangerous new dynamic. It has fostered an environment where the line between suspicion and a presumption of guilt can become perilously thin. The intense focus on a suspect from the outset, amplified by confirmation bias, can turn an investigation from a neutral search for truth into a mission to build a case against a single individual. For the person on the receiving end, an accusation can feel like the beginning of a process designed not to discover if they are guilty, but to prove that they are. This isn't an argument to go back to the old broken system. Victims deserve a justice system that takes them seriously, investigates their complaints thoroughly, and provides unwavering support. But the solution cannot be to simply invert the injustice. Supporting victims and upholding the presumption of innocence are not mutually exclusive goals. They are, and must be, the twin pillars of a just society. A system that prioritizes one at the expense of the other is fundamentally unstable. The moment we decide that getting a conviction is more important than the fairness of the process is the moment the entire structure of our justice system begins to crumble. The challenge now is to find a way to do both, to pursue perpetrators with rigor and determination, while fiercely protecting the golden thread that holds our legal system together, the presumption of innocence for all.